Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to talk about my most anticipated new releases of 2021. This is something I've been kicking around and wanting to do all January, and I know I'm getting to it a little bit late in the month, but you know, January has been a lot, and I won't go into why. But anyway, I finally got around to doing it. I'm really excited. I kind of where I was struggling a little bit with this is that if you follow along, you know I am terrible with TBRs. I just don't do well with them at all. So the idea of putting together a list of new releases that I could potentially get to seems a little bit like a TBR and therefore a little bit dangerous, because then what if I don't get to read all of these? But I looked back and I did one last year and I talked about 11 books and I read 5 of them. I figured that's a pretty good track record, so why not? So I have 20 books that seem really interesting to me that are coming out in 2021. Please note, I'm going to mention release dates. Release dates may change, but and these are just notions. Some of these are coming out a little bit later. Maybe I'll lose interest in them. Maybe once they get released, I'll learn more about them. For example, last year I included American Dirt on my list of most anticipated releases, and we all saw how that went down once it was actually released. But anyway, we have 20 books to cover. I'm going to try to keep this brief. I do have notes in front of me. So let's do this. The first one is actually something that has been released and I have on order, but because I don't have it, I figured I would talk about it now. It's The Inland Sea by Madeleine Watts. Now, what got me about this book is that it's about what refuge and comfort look like when you live in a constant state of emergency. And after the last 4 years, I feel like we all kind of have an idea of what that might feel like. To me, it's just fascinating. It's about a young woman in Australia who takes a part-time job as an emergency dispatcher. And it's also about her great-great-great-great-grandfather, who is a British explorer moving through Australia's wilderness in search of water. So there's a little bit about this myth of water. The Inland Sea is clearly important to the book because it's the title. And also it gets at that kind of colonial aspect, which is particularly interesting when you're talking about, say, Australia and the influence that it's had over time. So this to me is just a really interesting book. I had a little bit of money left on the gift card my husband gave me for Christmas at my local independent bookstore. So I called them, put it on order, and I'm really looking forward to it. That is The Inland Sea. It is already released. It was released on January 12th. The next one is something I actually already have pre-ordered, but it is not out right now. It comes out next week. It's Just As I Am by Cicely Tyson. It comes out January 26th. I love Cicely Tyson, so naturally, I absolutely want to read her memoir about her life and her career. I actually pre-ordered it on Libro, the audiobook, because I heard that the audiobook is read by both Cicely Tyson and Viola Davis, and I nearly swooned when I heard that. So how was I going to do this any other way? If you're unfamiliar, Cicely Tyson played Viola Davis's mother on How to Get Away with Murder. And it's just, I'm really looking forward to this book. I think it's going to be a very interesting read. I saw Cicely Tyson on Broadway when she did The Trip to Bountiful, and I'm really looking forward to this. The next one is Tell Me What You Mean by Joan Didion, which also comes out on January 26th. And I probably don't need to say a whole lot about it because it's Joan Didion. What more do you need? So all I will say is that it's a collection of 12 essays from throughout Didion's career, and I want it in my face right now. I love Joan Didion. I read her for the first time in high school. I took a class called Literature of Our Place, which is all books that were set in or written in or about California. And we read excerpts from Joan Didion's work, including Slouching Towards Bethlehem, and I've been a fan ever since. Now we move into February and The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed M. Massoud. This comes out on February 2nd. It's a comic debut novel about Anvar and Safwa, who take very different paths to get to America, where their paths converge in San Francisco in 2016 in ways that rock their communities and their families to their cores. I think it's just something that sounds really interesting. I really didn't know much about it until I started looking at a couple of different most anticipated looks, and this popped up on them. And I admit I passed over it on the first list because I hadn't heard of it. I didn't know much about it, but then I saw it on the second list and was like, that does sound really interesting. And by the time I saw it on a third list, I said, you know what, I'm putting it on the list because that does sound very interesting. Also coming out February 2nd is How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherie Jones. It's a debut novel. It's a story of class dysfunction in Jones's native Barbados following a thwarted burglary and the terrible chain of consequences that it sets into motion. And this is another one that popped up on pretty much every most anticipated books of 2021 list that I looked at. So it's probably going to be a big one. Next, coming out on February 9th is Gay Bar, Why We Went Out by Jeremy Atherton Lynn. I love queer history, so this seems right up my alley. As the title implies, it's a cultural history of gay bars and gay safe spaces and gay hookup sites, how they have evolved over time, and why they may be in danger now as gay bars in urban areas begin to close down. So it's kind of about the changing attitude toward homosexuality, the changing attitudes within the LGBTQ community, and to me that's just fascinating. And because that is so fascinating to me, I'm sure it will not surprise you that the next book on my list follows a very similar idea. It comes out February 16th. It's Let's Get Back to the Party by Salih. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And again, if you follow along, you know I love LGBTQ books. I love books that re-examine history or feature cultural or generational divides. And this book combines all of that. It follows a gay teacher in the weeks after the Supreme Court's ruling on marriage equality. He envies his students for their ability to live openly because he feels he was denied that. But he has an old friend who is much more hostile toward what he sees as the death of gay culture, believing that conformity is not peace, it's surrender. And I think especially paired with Gay Bar, it's interesting. And I feel like I am someone who was kind of born between those generations. I'm old enough to remember the sort of self-loathing that comes from the closet and feeling like you are unable to come out and live your life openly. But I'm young enough that I was able to adjust when attitudes began to change. And I guess because I feel like I'm sort of in the middle, I've always been fascinated by the divide between the two generations. And I'd be very curious to see how this book handles that. Now we move into March. Specifically March 2nd, when Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro is released. Now, novels or movies about AI rarely appeal to me, but I'm a big fan of Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day, so I'm willing to follow Ishiguro into this one. It is his first novel since he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and it follows Klara, who is an artificial friend waiting in a store for someone to purchase her and take her home. Marketing blurbs for the book describe it as a sort of meditation on what it means to love. And there are still a lot of books by Ishiguro that I have not read. I've only read Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day, but he's definitely 2 for 2 on that. And I've heard some mixed things about some of his other books, but there are a lot of mixed things that people could say about Never Let You Go, and I'm a fan of it. So I am looking forward to this one. Coming out the same day, March 2nd, is Abundance by Jakob Guanzon. Structured around the amount of cash in the protagonist's pocket, Abundance follows Henry and his son Junior after they are evicted from their trailer and forced to live in their truck. Henry was recently in prison for dealing opioids, but wants to find a way to celebrate his son's birthday. The book that goes on, of course, things spiral from there, and it reveals the systemic inequities around work, debt, addiction, incarceration, and healthcare in America today. And it sounds kind of bleak, but timely, and just hopefully fascinating. I'm definitely going to want to see more reviews of this one when it comes out, but it sounds like it could be just fascinating. So that's Abundance by Jakob Guanzon. Going back to the LGBTQ interest, on March 9th, we have Last Call, a true story of love, lust, and murder in queer New York by Elon Green. Now, I used to love true crime. I still dabble in it from time to time, and this one about a wave of murders surrounding a gay bar in the 1990s seems intriguing. The crimes are, of course, central, but it also seems like the book focuses on the victims' struggles with their identities, the failures of the police to respond, largely because they just weren't interested in protecting the gay community, a gay community that was already devastated by the AIDS epidemic, and the gay panic defense, and all of the different complicated legal issues and the larger impacts of it on that. It sounds really interesting to me. And again, that one is out on March 9th. Then we have There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job by Kikuko Tsumura, which is released on March 23rd. In this book, a woman bounces from job to job, trying to find a job that requires little to no thinking and not a whole lot of effort and is close to where she lives. As her odyssey continues, she reaches some surprising revelations. Tsumura has won Japan's most prestigious literary prize, but this is the first time her work is being translated into English. The translator is named Polly Barton, and this work has been compared to Convenience Store Woman, which I enjoyed, and I think a lot of other people here on BookTube enjoyed as well. So put this book on your radar, and remember, it is released on March 23rd. Then there is Libertie by Kaitlyn Greenidge, which comes out on March 30th. This is a YA historical fiction novel that follows Libertie Sampson, whose mother wants her to follow in her footsteps and attend medical school. Unfortunately, while Libertie's mother is light-skinned enough to pass, Libertie is not, which causes her to question what freedom means for a Black woman and what it means to know that your dreams may have to wait for a future generation. I know a lot of people are kind of picky about YA. There are a lot of people who are picky about historical fiction. I can be picky about historical fiction. I'm not really picky about YA, but this sounds very interesting to me. Then another one that popped up on a bunch of different lists is the final revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton, which is released on March 30th. I'm fascinated by the idea of fictional narratives that are structured as an oral history. If you follow along, you probably know that I was really intrigued by Daisy Jones and the Six. And this one immediately piqued my interest because it has that same oral history structure. And the fact that its theme also purportedly features Black women who dare to tell the truth, but whose voices are too often repressed, really sealed the deal for me. On the surface, it traces the rise and fall of a rock and roll duo from the 1970s, but I think this is one that I'm really looking forward to and will probably snap up when it is released. Next, we have Paradise, Nevada by Dario Diofebi, which is released on April 6th. I used to have a thing for twisty stories with a lot of intersecting storylines and characters, although it's really been a while since I scratched that itch. This is a debut novel, and it's about a group of strivers converging in Las Vegas 6 months before a bomb goes off in a luxury casino. And it sounds like a fascinating way to scratch that itch and get back to something really twisty and with intersecting storylines that converge. I'm also very intrigued by Las Vegas as a setting. I feel like I've read some books that really take advantage of it and make very interesting points. And I feel like this is an opportunity to kind of get back to something like that. Then we have Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, which is released on April 27th. I've read every fictional work that Jhumpa Lahiri has published, and I can't imagine that this book would be the exception, even if I don't think any of her subsequent work has really matched the quality of her Pulitzer Prize-winning debut story collection, which was Interpreter of Maladies. I absolutely love that book. And I've enjoyed her other work, just nothing has quite matched Interpreter of Maladies for me. This book is interesting because it was originally written in Italian and translated into English, and it follows a year in the life of a woman. And I think that approach, Jhumpa Lahiri wrote a nonfiction book about language, and I believe it was particularly about Italian. And so it's interesting that she wrote this novel in Italian and then had translated it into English. But I don't know too much about the book itself and the plot, but like I said, I'm a big fan of Interpreter of Maladies. I've read every fictional work that she has published, and like I said, I can't imagine that this one will be the exception. In a similar note, there is The Secret to Superhuman Strength by Alison Bechdel. This is released on May 4th. I am a super fan of Fun Home, which is Alison Bechdel's first graphic memoir about her relationship with her father. And I'm not so much a fan of the follow-up to that book, which is called Are You My Mother?, which obviously is about her relationship with her mother. So I confess to a degree of trepidation about this new book, but I do feel optimistic because this one seems to move away from family angst, and instead it focuses on her fascination with fitness fads. Yes, fitness fads. I'm not entirely convinced about that topic, but I love Fun Home enough to extend the benefit of the doubt, so we'll see. I have not gotten around to reading. If you follow along, you know I purchased a collection of her graphic novel Dykes to Watch Out For. I haven't gotten around to reading that yet either. Maybe I'll try to read that as a build-up to this. Next, we have Filthy Animals by Brandon Taylor. I have not even read Real Life yet. But I'm already intrigued by Taylor's next project. This is a collection of interlocked stories following young creative people in the Midwest as they navigate desire and violence. So it sounds like it's in the same thematic wheelhouse as Real Life, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year and which was one of the biggest books of 2020. Like I said, I haven't read Real Life yet, but I'm intrigued enough, and I follow him on Twitter, and he's very funny and clever. So I am still interested in his new work, even though I haven't read the first one. And now we start really getting into some heavy hitters. Not that Brandon Taylor is not a heavy hitter. Like I said, he was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year. But we have Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. This is scheduled to be released on September 14th. Now, Whitehead won back-to-back Pulitzer Prizes for The Underground Railroad and The Nickel Boys. So, of course, his next book is going to be an item of curiosity. Will he win an unprecedented third Pulitzer? Probably not. I think he has a very steep hill to climb to do that. Odds are definitely against it. But I am still very curious about this book, and I think this novel about heists and shakedowns in 1960s Harlem is still bound to be one of the biggest books of the year. And because I lived in Harlem before I moved to Montana, it's got that kind of added level of interest for me. And then there's a book called The Thing That Changes Everything by Jennifer Egan, which is scheduled to be released on October 7th. This is another previous Pulitzer Prize winner. She won for A Visit from the Goon Squad. So in case you can't tell, this fall is really promising to be big. And I've never read another book by Egan other than A Visit from the Goon Squad, despite the fact that I own two others. I own Manhattan Beach and Look at Me. But I've always been really curious about her writing. I did enjoy A Visit from the Goon Squad. I saw her speak at the 92nd Street Y, and I thought she was just a really fascinating person, and her point of view and things that led her and inspired her to write A Visit from the Goon Squad were really interesting. So there are not a lot of details about this one. Plot description and everything is still kind of under wraps, but it definitely has my attention. And finally, just announced Fight Night by Miriam Taves. This does not even have a release date. It is scheduled for sometime in fall, and not much is known about it other than the fact that it is written as a girl's love letter to 3 generations of women who raised her. I am an All My Puny Sorrows super fan, so I will follow Taves anywhere. If you have not read All My Puny Sorrows, what are you doing with your life? Please read All My Puny Sorrows. It's funny, it's sad, it's wonderful. I also read Women Talking by her, and that was also very good. My heart will always belong to All My Puny Sorrows, but Women Talking was also a very good book. And I think Miriam Taves is a very unique talent, and I am always curious to see what she has going on. So those are all of the things that I am looking forward to in 2021. I would love to hear what you are looking forward to. There are some other releases like Richard Powers, but I was not a huge fan of the Overstory. So, and Jonathan Franzen has a book. I have famously DNF'd both of the books of his that I have tried to read. So there are reasons I didn't put Richard Powers and Jonathan Franzen on this list, but I would love to hear what you are looking forward to this year. Please put it in the comment section down below. Let's create even more of a resource for people to check out other titles that will be coming out this year. So if you're interested in any of these books, please pre-order, check out your library. Most libraries will have ways to request titles, so you can make sure your library will get a copy. I've had a lot of comments recently from people, well, not a lot. I've had a couple, like maybe 3 or 4 comments from people lately saying that they are waiting for a book to come out in paperback so they can read it. And I just kind of want to throw that out there. Your library is a wonderful resource. There are library apps like Libby, so please don't let price point deter you. I understand it is always a concern, but libraries are great resources. Library apps can be really great resources as well. So check them out. Find one that works for you and stick with it. And again, let me know what you're excited about. I would love to hear it. If you have recommendations based on any of the books that I've talked about, I would love to hear that as well. As always, thank you for following along. It is very much appreciated, and I will be back. Here's hoping for a great reading year that is 2021, a great year in general for 2021, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.